I have a problem with the way the Marlins have operated. The Marlins are, in Tony Clark's famous phrase, racing to the bottom again. Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Fair Territory, the Monday edition. And we have a fun show for you planned today. A lot of cool stuff to talk about. First of all, I did not realize trade season this year would begin before Cinco de Mayo, but evidently it did. We also had an exciting Major League debut over the weekend, Christian Scott, and I'm going to go through my favorite debuts that I've covered for Fox, just for Fox, and I've had some really good ones. That'll be in the second segment, and of course, we will get to your questions as well. But first, the big story of the weekend, by far the biggest, would be the trade that the San Diego Padres made with the Miami Marlins. Padres getting Luis Arráez, the Marlins getting the reliever, the new one from Korea, Woo Suk-go, and three prospects, Dylan Head, Jacob Marcy, and Nathan Martorella. This trade was surprising for its timing, first of all, and for the fact that the Marlins, before Cinco de Mayo, essentially have quit on their season. So I'm going to pose three questions here, try to answer those questions in explaining this deal, giving context to this deal, and hopefully enlightening people as to what the heck happened. Also wrote about it today on The Athletic, and a lot of what I'm going to say is similar and in the same kind of vein as what I wrote. So let's start with why the Marlins did this. Why are they going in this direction? Well, it all started back in the offseason when the owner, Bruce Sherman, ran off Kim Ng, the general manager. Sherman then hired Peter Bendix from the Tampa Bay Rays to run the team. Peter Bendix had never run a team before. This is going to be his first chance. But what is Sherman's goal? Sherman's goal is the same goal every low-revenue team has, to be the Tampa Bay Rays. Every team wants to be the Rays, win on the cheap. And the Marlins justified the way they went about their offseason, signing only one free agent, Tim Anderson, $5 million. He now has the fourth lowest OPS in the majors. One free agent. And they did this because they felt, well, last year we were lucky. We made the playoffs, yeah. First time in 20 years they made the playoffs. First time since they won the World Series in 2003, but their Pythagorean one-loss record, which is based on run differential, was 9 wins worse than their actual record. So by that measure, they were the luckiest team in the majors. Now, when you have a season like that, you can go in one of two directions. You can say, all right, we were fortunate last year. We were not the best team, but we can build on that. And let's address our deficiencies and go forward. Or you can do what the Marlins did, which essentially, even though they have the manager of the year, the reigning one in Skip Schumacher, is to say, you know what, we were lucky, we're not that good. We've got to rebuild our infrastructure. We've got to go backwards again, as they've done numerous times in their history. Now, they do need to rebuild their infrastructure. Even critics of the organization say they need better farm system, a better international scouting, better everything with regard to player development and scouting. Okay. It is possible, ladies and gentlemen, for a major league team to chew gum and walk all at once, to rebuild the infrastructure, and to field a competitive major league team. Well, the Marlins aren't doing that. They want to be the Rays? Well, guess what? The Rays don't do this. They don't retreat in this fashion. The Rays, since 2008, have had only 2 seasons, in which they won fewer than 80 games. All right, that's question 1, why the Marlins did this. Question 2, why now for this trade? This is really interesting. We rarely see trades of this magnitude in May. It's not unheard of. It just doesn't happen that often. So the deadline is almost 3 months away. Okay, so this is obviously early. But the Padres have been pursuing Arráez since really the offseason. They have kind of focused on him. They wanted a left-handed hitter. They wanted a contact guy in front of their power hitters. They wanted Arráez. They were hell-bent on getting him, I would say. And A.J. Preller, their general manager, when he's hell-bent on getting a guy, he usually gets that guy, for better or for worse. Now, obviously, the Marlins had some say in this as well, and you heard what Bendix said after they announced the trade. He said, well, it was unlikely we were going to make the playoffs. Well, no kidding. It was kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that you weren't going to make the playoffs. But in Bendix's mind, he felt that this deal, the one that they got for the 4 players, would not have been available to them if they had waited. And in A.J. Preller's mind, hey, I wanted Luis Arráez for 140 days of this season instead of 60. Makes a lot of sense. There's another year of control as well. So Bendix said, okay, I couldn't walk past this. That's what he said on the record. I'm not so sure that's true. And I'm not so sure that if he was going to include the money that he did in this trade, if he was going to pay virtually all of Arraez's salary for 2024, and if he was going to take on Woo Suk Go's virtually entire contract, $4.5 million over 2 years as well, maybe he could have waited, allowed Arraez to go back up to 350, which is what he's going to hit maybe, and broadcast to all 29 teams, we're willing to take on some money. We're willing to pay almost all Arraez's salary. We're willing to do all these things. Make us your best offers. It didn't seem to me he did that. It seemed to me he locked in on the Padres. And again, maybe that is the best he could have done. There are mixed reviews on this trade, and we'll get to this third question right now. Why this particular package? Why did this happen the way it did? If you read a lot and if you went through some things over the weekend, you saw the mixed reviews. J.J. Cooper of Baseball America was not high on this package. He had the same criticism that a lot of people have had, that there's no big piece. Now, Dylan Head was the 25th pick overall in the 2023 draft. Jacob Marcy was the MVP of the Arizona Fall League. But Head is a guy who is boom or bust. Marcy is perhaps a 4th outfielder. Unless he develops power, then he could be a really bona fide regular. So this package was maybe not what some people thought it could have been. Keith Law, on the other hand, had an opposite view to J.J. Cooper. He loved it for the Marlins, thought they did extremely well. You see the headline there. Marlins make out like sharks in the Luis Arráez trade with the Padres. I don't know that I would say they made out like sharks, but these things you never know exactly in real time how these things are going to turn out. You never know. I can point to, and I did in my column today, a number of instances in which people ripped trades that later turned out to be quite the opposite of what fans and media anticipated. So, part of the equation here as well is Arraez. And as I said on the Fox broadcast Saturday, and as I repeated in the column today, and I'll say it once more, he's a tricky player to evaluate. Assessing this deal is difficult because it's difficult to assess Arraez. He's a guy who, yes, is a 2-time batting champion. Someone who, in the baseball parlance, is famous. But he's a 2-time batting champion who really doesn't play good defense at second base. And he isn't the profile you would want at first base. Why? Because he has no power. So he has to hit basically 350 to be, well, maybe not 350. He could hit 325 as career average to have value. And there is some thought that a guy like that was not going to command as much as perhaps some in the media and some fans might think. Okay, I get it. And if he's a singles hitter who plays poor defense, maybe he's not that valuable a guy. But it remains to be seen, obviously, as with all trades, how this is all going to play out. But the Marlins, I have a problem with the way the Marlins have operated. And you can see now that the CBA, while it did some good things to address tanking, certainly the draft lottery has helped, in my opinion, some of the other things as well, it hasn't addressed it completely. The Marlins are, in Tony Clark's famous phrase, racing to the bottom again. And maybe it all works out. Maybe Peter Bendix's vision and Bruce Sherman's vision is going to, in 3 or 4 years, prove to be a quite good vision, one that turned this franchise around. We've heard it all before from this organization, and we've seen it all before. We've seen this kind of conduct before, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I'm not going to bet on the Miami Marlins. I think their track record indicates you should not bet on the Miami Marlins. All right, moving on. We've got an exciting week ahead in the sport, as we always do, starting with tonight, Monday night, Walker Buehler's season debut. Walker Buehler has not pitched, coming off his second Tommy John surgery since June of 2022. Almost 2 years, we haven't seen a guy who was, when healthy, one of the best pitchers in the sport. So this is an exciting night for the Dodgers. Buehler has had a long recovery from his second TJ. It included 6 rehabilitation starts. He joked that that might have been a record. But yes, I'm excited to see Walker Buehler back again. Certainly, he can help the Dodgers a great deal if indeed he proves to be the guy that, or something close to the guy he was before. A season debut for Walker Buehler, a major league debut tonight for Kyle Manzardo of the Cleveland Guardians. This is the guy they acquired last deadline for Aaron Savali. And at the time, most analysts perceived it to be a big price to pay. Kyle Manzardo has proven to be one of the best hitters in the minor leagues. He's a left-handed hitter. He's going to join the Guardians. Why hasn't he been up sooner when he's been dominating AAA? Well, they really didn't have a place for him. But now with Stephen Kwan's injury, one of the more unfortunate injuries of the weekend, Trey Turner's being another one, there is an opening for Manzardo. He's a first baseman DH. He'll probably alternate with Josh Naylor. They've got to figure out their outfield, but they're off to a great start. They're going to miss Kwan, but it's going to be fun to see Manzardo and what he does. Also this week, a series between the Astros and Yankees at Yankee Stadium. Always interesting when the Astros come to Yankee Stadium because of the history between these two teams, the history in the ALCS. Of course, the Astros have dominated the Yankees in that round. And Justin Verlander is going to start for the Astros in this first game of the series. And keep in mind, the Astros are still struggling, still scrambling to find their footing. Josh Hader, another rocky outing on Sunday. And you look at the AL West standings, not looking too good for the Astros right now. They are 10 under 500, tied with the Angels in last place, 7 games behind the Seattle Mariners. The Rangers are a half game out. The Oakland Athletics, the Oakland, Sacramento, Vegas Athletics, 2.5 games back. So a lot of fun stuff in store for the week, but we'll be talking about that trade, the Luis Arráez trade, for a long time. Time now for the Inside Dish, and I've got a cool one this week. I talked about it in the open. My favorite part of my TV job, the one I do for Fox, is covering major league debuts. Now I'm excluding the postseason. That's, of course, my favorite part. But during the regular season, my favorite thing is when we get a major league debut, the excitement of a kid fulfilling his lifelong dream, the excitement of an organization seeing its drafting and development efforts come to fruition, and the excitement of the parents who usually are in attendance. Now, we had another one on Saturday, Christian Scott's debut for the Mets, and it was quite successful. Christian Scott was brilliant in his performance, and I got to interview the dad on camera, Doug. He was great. It was a lot of fun. These things are always fun. So it got me thinking, all right, which one of these are my favorites? Because I covered quite a number now. This is my 19th year at Fox, and this happens from time to time where we get a kid in his debut and we get a successful debut. So I figured, okay, I'll go back in time. I'll rank my 4 favorites from bottom to top. Now, my first one is actually going to be Christian Scott. He's going to be number 4 on my list. And before Met fans start yelling at me, Ken, what are you talking about, man? Christian Scott, hey, he was awesome. Yeah, I know he was awesome. And maybe that I've lost my New York accent a little bit. And by the way, for people who don't know, I grew up a Mets fan. I've heard all about it for my whole life, okay? You lose that stuff when you're doing the job. I'm not a Mets fan anymore. I'm not a fan of any team. I don't hate any team. But Christian Scott is number 4 here, even though he pitched 6 2/3 innings, had a great presence about him, allowed only 1 run. And you saw the scene we had where as he went out to the field to warm up about an hour before first pitch, he hugged his mom. His grandparents were there. It was a really cool moment. His dad was there as well, sat right behind the dugout. The whole thing was just spectacular. Unfortunately for the Mets, they lost the game, but it didn't detract from the impact of Scott's debut and the potential for their rotation to be really interesting as the season goes on. Because remember, they've got Kodai Senga coming back, Tyler McGill coming back, David Peterson coming back. They're going to have some depth. They're going to be able to do some things creatively with sending guys back and forth to the minors and perhaps putting some people in the bullpen to give them length there. So Christian Scott, number 4 on this list, and you're going to see why he's number 4 because I've got some really cool ones ahead of him. Number 3, This one goes back to April 2019, and it kind of reminded me of the Christian Scott debut. The Mets-Tampa Bay matchup this weekend, it wasn't all that exciting without Christian Scott. And I remember April 2019, Fox had a game. It was San Francisco at Pittsburgh, and I was decidedly unenthused about this game. I was thinking, what are we doing? Why are we covering the Pirates, man? They weren't that good. And the Giants were interesting, but not like crazy dominant or anything like that. And yet, as so often happens in baseball, you never know what is going to happen on an individual day. And that day, Cole Tucker and Brian Reynolds both were called up to make their major league debuts for the Pirates. Tucker led off for the Pirates, played shortstop. He was a big prospect at the time. He hit a decisive 2-run homer in the 5th inning of a rain-shortened game. The game only lasted 5 innings. It was a thrilling moment. I got to interview his parents in the stands. Brian Reynolds that day didn't quite have the same day that Cole Tucker did. And obviously, he went on to a better career than Cole Tucker has. Cole is back in the majors now with the Angels. But that day, at least, Reynolds was overshadowed. He batted 5th, played center field. I believe he had a hit. But the Cole Tucker home run in his major league debut, that was really cool. But it's still only number 3 on my list. Number 2 is one that happened just last season, and it was incredible for what this player did in his major league debut. Now, we've talked about Christian Scott, who pitched really well. We've talked about Cole Tucker, who hit a home run. Big stuff. Sal Frelick played one of the best games I have ever seen any player have in his debut. This was for Milwaukee last July. 3 hits, the game-tying and go-ahead RBIs in this game. Also had 2 spectacular catches in right field. It was an amazing performance. Interviewed him after the game, interviewed his dad during the game. He got the Gatorade action afterward. And it was just a very memorable day from a guy who looks like he's going to be a really good major league player. Sal Frelick, number 2 on my list. And number 1 for this one, we've got to go back to 2010. That's right, 2010, 14 years ago. Red Sox fans will remember this. Daniel Nava. Daniel Nava was 27 years old when he came up. And I remember that morning, I was talking to Theo Epstein, who was, of course, then running the Red Sox. And I generally always check in with the GMs of each team before a game just to see what's going on, get their perspectives on things. These are background conversations. I don't necessarily quote them during the game. And Theo told me that morning, hey, you can't report this, but we've got a guy coming up named Daniel Nava. He's 27. He's got an amazing story. Look into it. He did have an amazing story. He was a guy who was like 4'10" going into high school, 70 pounds. So I had an immediate liking for him. He was a guy who was cut by his college team his freshman year at Santa Clara. He was undrafted. He played independent ball. He toiled years in the minors, finally gets to the majors, hits a grand slam on the first pitch he sees. He was only the 4th player in history to hit a grand slam in his first at bat. He was only the 2nd player to do it on the first pitch he saw. And Daniel Nava went on to have a decent enough career. He did some good things for the Red Sox. Got to the majors, which is the goal of any player. So those are 4 memorable debuts that I've had the privilege of covering. And this, frankly, this kind of thing is why I love the job so much, because it's something that's pretty unique to baseball. A debut like that, a debut in general, when it happens in the NFL, the NBA, it's not necessarily a big story. It's a different kind of deal. Guys don't toil years in the minors. Guys don't come up necessarily as these exciting prospects that you're waiting for and hearing about. They go generally in the NFL and NBA right to the big league, and they're guys you know about, and their debuts are not necessarily special. I know there are exceptions, but this is kind of a baseball thing. And it also speaks to the unpredictability of the sport. We often don't know when these players are coming up, and we often are just kind of surprised when the moment happens and kind of intrigued by what's going to be. And we're going to have another one tonight with Kyle Manzardo and the Cleveland Guardians. So pay attention to those debuts. They aren't always a blast, but often they are. And again, I've had the privilege for Fox of covering quite a number of them. I gave you 4 there. I'm sure there are others. I'm sure there are some that I've forgotten. But those 4 really stood out in my mind. Time now for Grillin Ken, the segment of the show where I answer your questions. Let's get right to it. The first one this week comes from Kyle Davis, Gingerbomb25, who asks, what do you make of Corey Seager's noticeably slow start to the season? The answer here to me seems pretty obvious. Corey Seager underwent sports hernia surgery on January 30th. And if you remember, he had this problem in the postseason. They thought it would heal. They didn't really anticipate it would be a lingering issue, and it became one. So he had the surgery January 30th, which is quite late. It's only 2 weeks before spring training. Did not get on the field for a spring training game until March 23rd. So it's understandable that Corey Seager is off to a relatively slow start. Batting .228, 2 homers, OPS below 600. And the reason to me seems pretty clear. He's struggling to get his legs under him, struggling to regain his strength after undergoing that surgery. Do I expect Corey Seager at some point to be the normal Corey Seager? Yes. I don't know how long it's going to take. I'm sure Corey Seager is kind of frustrated by it all and wants to be back to his old self. But when you undergo surgery 2 weeks before spring training is supposed to start, when you don't start playing games in spring training until a week before the season is supposed to start, it's not exactly surprising that your first month will be difficult. All right, next question. This one comes from Richard Proctor, who asks, what is the feeling in the Rays clubhouse given the slow start? The offense hasn't been clicking aside from this weekend, and the pitching hasn't been a strong point so far. Good points all, Richard. This team has been disappointing. There's no question about it. They did sweep the Mets over the weekend, and perhaps now Yandy Diaz will get going, Randy Arozarena will get going, their pitching will start to stabilize. They've had all kinds of problems in all kinds of areas, defense being another one. The feeling in the clubhouse is what you might expect when a team starts to struggle. Teams generally aren't as happy in those moments as they are when they're winning. It's kind of common. And in talking with some of the Rays players over the weekend, there was a strong feeling that they were going to come out of this, that was just one of those things. But it was unfamiliar territory for them. Remember last season, they started, I believe it was 27-6. Everything went right. This season, a case of the opposite, everything seemingly going wrong. And because it's a young team, you can see things come apart. But I don't expect that to happen. I expect them to get better as the season goes on. And I don't know that they've got real chemistry issues right now outside of the norm that you would have a struggling team. Tensions rising, some frustration rising. We saw Kevin Cash bench Jose Siri last week. These things do happen. They happen in the course of a normal major league season. But I'm not sure I would say the clubhouse at this point is one that is coming apart. Quite the opposite. Actually, I think they're about to come together. All right, the final question. This one comes from Breakfast Cat, who asks, do you also consider it a travesty that Tony Gwynn was a lifelong Padre or that Ernie Banks was a lifelong Cub? Also, why so much criticism of Trout of staying loyal and yet zero criticism for the very man that is responsible for his lack of success, Artie Moreno? Breakfast Cat, the man who must be named, assuming it's a man and not a woman, is asking questions regarding my column last week about Mike Trout and his injury. And basically, the column said it will now be that much more difficult for Mike Trout to be traded. He's got this injury history, etc., etc. In my opinion, the column was respectful of Trout. I noted that he was loyal. I noted that his earnestness is one of his most endearing qualities. And I ended the column by saying, as good as his intentions might have been, it's a very sad thing to say that he's going to be, it looks like, an angel for a long time. Now, the people who didn't like the column basically pointed out Mike Trout has chosen to be an angel. He wants to be an angel. Very true. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. In fact, I don't have a problem with that, period. Player can do whatever he wants to do, and he signed 2 extensions with the Angels. He has wanted to be there, and he's been quite clear in interviews I've done with him for Fox that he wants to win in Anaheim. The problem is the owner who signed him to those extensions, Artie Moreno, has essentially betrayed Mike Trout's good faith, and by running the team the way he has, put Trout in a position where it looks like he's not going to get back to the playoffs anytime soon, and he hasn't been there since 2014, has never won a playoff game. And this notion, well, Mike Trout he decided to stay there. It's his choice. He can do what he wants. All true. But Mike Trout has also said quite clearly that he wants to win. He said in spring training he was pushing the front office and owner, Arte Moreno, to sign free agents. He is, in my opinion, or was, growing impatient. Because Mike Trout, yes, he wants to be in the playoffs. And the shame of this whole situation is that he is in this position with this team, because he is injured, where it's going to be difficult to trade him. It was never going to be easy. We know that. Once the injuries set in, his value changes as a player. But that column, I suggest Breakfast Cat read it again because he's got some things wrong. And I suggest people look at it in the way that I'm saying. That, yeah, if you're an Angels fan, sure, you're not going to like the idea of Mike Trout getting traded. But I bet there's a certain percentage of Angels fans who would not mind their guy being freed from that misery because they have a great affection for Mike Trout. And that's kind of where the column came from. We all have affection for Mike Trout. And by the way, Tony Gwynn played in 2 World Series, 1984 and 1998. Much different situation than Mike Trout. Thanks to everyone for their questions. Thank you for listening, for watching. You know where to find us. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. We will be back on Thursday, our normal Thursday show with Alana Rizzo. Get your questions ready for that one as well. Have a great week, everyone.
So if you're new to the BetMGM party, the bonus code is FOUL. Sign up and deposit at least $10 into your account and then place a wager and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if the bet loses. And if that happens, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. Gambling problem or concern, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.